To harness the full potential of the labor force, we need to reimagine work. We need to redesign workplaces so that they are better aligned with the lives of the people who work in them. And we need to redefine what makes a good and successful employee so that performance is no longer measured by how many hours an employee puts in, but by how effective and efficient employees can be. The Redesigning, Redefining Work Summit brings together leading academics, corporate experts, policymakers, and the media to set a new research agenda for the 21st century. Our goal is to redesign and redefine work so that people and businesses thrive.
The goal of this video is to offer 4 big ideas to spark new collaborations, new pathways, and new programs for the redesign of work. The ideas can be useful wherever you are on the redesign journey. If you are just starting this work, try an experiment. If you want to dive deeper, work with a researcher to study the impact of the experiment. Using the framework from the video on redesign principles, these ideas can help lay the foundation for building a workplace where people thrive and companies win in the global marketplace.
I think that when we bring in diverse perspectives and different ideas, I think it opens up the possibility for figuring out how to do things better.
I often find it inspirational to start with Yogi Berra. So I love this quote: "In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is." Well, I would like to really explore the challenges of implementing flexible work policies that have great support in theory, but encounter enormous difficulty in being executed in practice. I'm a real fan of experimentation. I think when we get risk averse is when we say we have to roll this out to 38,000 people. So I'm trying to get find a practice, find a partner, find a group, do a pilot, do it covertly, test some things out, and then try to, make it bigger. Because doing it all at once is really hard.
Once an organization is ready for work redesign, it needs to identify a starting point. An important starting point is a pilot program. Pilot programs enable modifications and improvements before a program is rolled out on a larger scale. And pilot programs enable leaders to prove that the solutions work here in our own organization. Pilot programs can help an organization figure out how to address the cultural issue that may undermine the success of a policy.
Redesigning and redefining work is not just about policies at the sort of governmental or organizational level, but it requires addressing these cultural factors like flexibility stigma that keep workers from utilizing these newly in place policies and keeps employers sanctioning workers for taking advantage of them. Even with the best policies in place, if workers don't take advantage of them, it's difficult to say how much progress we've actually made.
One big idea is to move beyond a model of increasing diversity of the workplace to one where organizations build inclusive environments where people can bring their full selves to work.
Today, most diversity efforts have focused on bringing in women and people of color and then trying to mold them into the workplace. Where now we're moving into an era of inclusion where we're instead trying to fix workplaces so that people can bring their full authentic selves to work. One example of a program that moves in that direction is a collaboration between NYU law professor Kenji Yoshino and Deloitte's Christy Smith. Their initiative is called Uncovering Talent. This initiative provides a common language and framework for designing a new paradigm for inclusion that can engage everyone in the organization.
I saw Kenji speak in 2006 on his book covering a hidden assault on civil rights. And at that moment, I immediately saw the parallels to the corporate setting. And what excited me about that was I saw even back then how efforts in corporate America were stalling as it related to inclusion, and more importantly, how talent issues were becoming ever more important to leaders. And so Kenji and I came together last year to talk about these parallels and how his work from a legal standpoint could be applied to the organizational setting.
Covering is downplaying a known disfavored identity. It means that the identity is known in your interaction with another person, but you make an effort to keep it from looming large in the interaction. So you put it in the background rather than the foreground. I developed 4 different axes about the ways in which individuals cover: appearance, affiliation, advocacy, and association. Appearance-based covering would involve circumstances where women downplayed their femininity in their self-presentation. For example, think of Margaret Thatcher, who went to a voice coach to lower her voice as a budding politician. Affiliation-based covering has to do with how women downplay cultural attributes or associations in order to make sure that they code as more like men. A classic example of this would be women downplaying their childcare responsibilities so that they not be seen as less committed to work. Advocacy-based covering has to do with people muting their activism on behalf of a particular group. And the 4th is association. Association-based covering for women would be instances in which women avoided other women, say in mentorship or sponsorship relationships, lest this be seen as favoritism.
One of the things that Kenji and I are most excited about in this work is that people immediately get it. From the moment they start hearing about what covering is and how it's defined, they start using the language. That in and of itself begins the cultural shift that needs to happen in organizations.
While inclusive environments certainly benefit corporations, they're also very good for our universities. If universities want to be able to generate the best ideas possible and solve the world's most pressing problems and fully train our students, we need to be fully including everybody in our midst as well.
Uncovering is the next wave in the workplace because it fundamentally redefines the conversation around inclusion, and it's a comprehensive paradigm in which everyone sees themselves.
Because all of us have had the experience of covering some aspect of our identity, the framework of uncovering enables us to better understand each other and provides a common ground for talking about inclusion. It's important that leaders set the stage. One reason that people cover is that they fear that they'll be penalized for their identities.
There is a correlation between individuals' sense and need to cover with their commitment to the organization and their sense of opportunity within the organization. This is an important finding for managers in particular. If individuals within their direct reporting relationship feel that they have to cover, there's a higher propensity that those individuals will feel less committed to the organization, and then you are at risk of losing those individuals. What's been powerful is that individuals now see that A, they're not alone, B, that there's a path forward, and C, that they have a language by which they can define how they're making choices and decisions in their daily life at work.
The next idea looks at hourly and low-wage work. Oftentimes, work redesigns focus on the professional end of the workforce. In order to fully redesign workplaces, we need to include all careers.
Over half our workforce are employed in hourly wage jobs. This group of workers faces many challenges, but one of the biggest ones is getting enough hours to make ends meet.
I want to point out that the majority of workers in the wage and salaried workforce are paid by the hour, not by a salary. 56% of men and 62% of women are paid by the hour. Over 70% of African American and Hispanic men and women are paid by the hour. For some, certainly over-hours are a big problem, but there is a growing proportion of people who do not get enough work. It doesn't cost much for employers to keep a lot of workers on their payroll. What we find is that managers across industries tend to overhire in these low-level part-time hourly jobs so that they can then have a pool of workers to draw on to work short shifts during times of peak demand and to help deal with these high rates of turnover. When resources are free, be they human resources, water, or gas, people really have little motivation for good stewardship. One of the things that we need to think about is how do we help create a situation where individual workers matter in firms. Certainly one way is to redesign those jobs so that people can add value to the work they do. People want to add value to the work they do, but that's unlikely to be meaningful, those redesign changes, unless firms are investing in every worker in their firm.
In her recommendations, Susan talks about what companies can do and also has ideas for policy changes.
A couple of things that we talk about is minimum hour guarantees. We have a minimum wage, but we have no minimum hours. Employers do not have to schedule you or work you for even 1 hour, and we find in lots of workplaces people will go weeks and months without any hours whatsoever or only 4 hours, and they're still on the firm's payroll. So by having some pocket of minimum hours, it at least says that the firm is investing in you.
Getting back to the idea of schedule control, all employees benefit from having more control over their work schedules. Yet that control may look different for different types of jobs and careers.
As we think about, alternative work arrangements, I think we should add full-time stable work to that because that is becoming very rare, and that's becoming an alternative arrangement. There's no work-life balance or integration or whatever we want to call it when you don't earn enough to take care of yourself and your family.
As we move toward a more networked world, technology offers new means of connecting people within and across organizations. The big idea is using technology to build communities aligned with and in support of new workplace cultures and the development of all employees.
Bringing together members of the community sounds so simple, and yet it really is an incredibly powerful change lever. In fact, it's the small things that often can lead to big changes in organizations. Community networks enable people to build relationships by sharing common experiences. I believe community building within organizations is the next big idea for creating great, inclusive workplaces.
We are sitting at an incredibly interesting time where we're moving from individuals being connected in the context of social networks and passively following other people to community networks and collaborative networks. I think in most people's minds this has the impact in the collaborative economy or sharing economy. My favorite example is the fact that there are 500,000 people who are Airbnb hosts today, which is basically the same number as a Hilton hotel chain today. And you have an internal organization at Airbnb of 500 people, managing essentially a workforce of 500,000 people, of which the vast majority are outside the enterprise, outside the building. Communities are actually a phenomenal way of connecting people and keeping people's attention and providing people a way to get things done. So when I look at the fact that we are moving from individuals to teams, we're moving from social networks that are about passive to community networks which are about active engagement and bringing people together to get things done. And I think inherent in all of this, we're moving from within companies the idea of controlling employees to influencing employees both inside and outside the firewall.
Our experience is there are real limits to what can be done from a top-down perspective, and what we need is the grassroots efforts all around the world to sustain us.
Before community networks, leadership education and mentoring were only available to people who had made it to the top of an organization. Now employees at all levels can have access to peer mentoring, connecting, and training. While leading diversity efforts at a large high-tech company, I used a variety of community networks to enhance collaboration and build cross-functional skills. For example, we brought together groups of employees from engineering, marketing, sales, and human resources and sent them on a customer site visit together. By spending the time together before, during, and after the actual visit, people mentored one another and they taught each other about the area of expertise that they specifically had for that customer. In addition to skill building and network development, we also saw some amazing outcomes for those customers. In fact, when a small group came together on a creative solution after a particular customer visit, it resulted in a multi-million-dollar sale. So bringing together members of teams that frequently work in isolation and don't typically have interactions with one another can result in powerful unlocking of assumptions and idea sharing. Something simple like focusing a cross-functional network on rethinking customer engagement can result in a community built around a common goal that now has language and an emotional connection that drives their desire to see one another succeed.
If technology can provide tools for building communities, we can look for ways communities can build workplace cultures where all people thrive.
At Stanford, we're using a single curriculum across a set of community networks to provide participants with common language around a set of skills and experiences. We know from our participants that these communities are preventing isolation, building important networks of support for individuals' growth and development, and creating a stronger connection to not only the community, but the organization as a whole. When setting up an effective community network, there are 3 keys to success. First, ask the right questions of the stakeholders in the organization in order to understand their potential reactions. Make sure that the content used is engaging and powerful and enables diverse and exciting conversations. And don't be too prescriptive. Let the natural power of the community emerge as the members get to know each other and identify the things that are most important to them.
The next step is that we need to change the structure of work. Even though we often treat work like it cannot be changed, it can and it has. And this is really the next step if we want to create workplaces that fully harness the talent of all of our workers.
We hope the ideas presented here suggest new avenues for creating workplaces where all people can thrive.